Hi everyone, it's Mark Merrill with Firm. We're talking about ICE jobs, ICE, immigration people, officers, and that sort of thing. Immigration, ICE jobs, and state renovations, among other issues. First of all, folks, as you see before you here is a close-up shot of an ICE agent, all decked out as his badge and everything else. But also notice, folks, that more than 100,000 Americans have applied to join ICE and DHS to rid our country, our major cities mostly, of all the illegals and the ones that want to cause us harm and destroy our children at the same time. The source comes from the Epoch Times. That's how we start our program today. As you see, folks, this is just one of the ICE officers' many uniforms that they wear, doing their job to rid our country of the illegals and keep our cities safe, starting with Washington, D.C., of course. New recruits can get up to $50,000 in bonuses and benefits, such as student loan forgiveness. How about that? Time is now, folks, to go out there and get yourself a real job. Our country is calling you to serve at ICE, according to DHS Secretary Kristi Noem in a statement. In the wake of the Biden administration's failed immigration policies, your country needs dedicated men and women of ICE to get the worst of the criminals out of our country, she said. This is a defining moment in our nation's history. Your skills, your experience, and your courage have never been more essential. Together, all of us must defend the homeland. Applications began pouring in after the DHS launched the Defend the Homeland ICE recruitment drive back on July 29th, and now here we are almost in September. The agency is offering recruits incentives, as we mentioned, including overtime pay, forgiveness options, and enhanced retirement benefits. ICE employs at least 20,000 law enforcement people and support personnel across the 400 offices in the United States and globally. This act allocated $170 billion for border security and immigration enforcement over a 5-year period, folks. This is fantastic. It's the best news we've had in a long friggin' time. ICE was originally allocated $76 billion, which is almost 10 times the agency's typical annual budget. Gee, I wonder who set that. Let's forget about that, okay? Out of the $76 billion, ICE will spend 45 of it, $45 billion, to expand detention capacity. $30 billion will be allocated for hiring 10,000 more staff members, which is expected to ensure the deportation of 1 million people per year. Wow, talk about cleaning up the United States. Giant broom and a dustpan. Out you go. All ICE enforcement recruits are required to go through medical screening, drug screening, and complete a physical fitness test. Duh. I could have guessed that. And in this brief presentation, folks, about ICE jobs and state renovations, among other things, applicants were previously required to be between 21 and 37 or 40 years old, depending on the position. Lots of other information, which we will provide in this link from the Epoch Times, folks, talks about detention conditions, and also from a Senator John Ossoff of Georgia, believe it or not a Democrat, on July 30th released a report claiming that pregnant women and children were being abused in the U.S. immigration system, but wrong, Senator. Since January 20th, President Trump's inauguration, his investigation received or identified 510 credible reports of human rights abuse against individuals held in law enforcement custody. Among those 41 credible reports of physical and sexual abuse of individuals. But hold the fort. On August 7th, about 3 weeks ago, from this podcast broadcast, DHS dismissed the claims made in the report, and the agency said pregnant women receive nutritional support, mental health services, regular prenatal visits, and accommodations in line with community standards of care. So there, Ossoff. Jeez. You know, enough already. Idiot. Next up, folks, we're going to go to part of a little problem. It's not that big a deal, actually, once we boil it down a little bit here and give you the details and what we're used to giving you here, folks. Truth, facts, reality, and common sense. Right there. It seems Ms. Katrina Smith, who is our wonderful GOP House Minority Representative supporting Billy Bob Falkingham, our GOP Minority Leader in the House of Representatives here in the good old state of Maine, came across the girders and the steel rods and poles coming out of the ground in front of the Blaine house on State Street. Let's show you, all right? Then we'll get to the story. So now, as you see, folks, there's all the rods coming out of the ground of the State House a few days ago, around the 25th of August, to be specific. And Ms. Smith took some pictures of it. We went down. We weren't allowed to take any pictures, let alone talk to anybody. I guess she wasn't able to talk to anybody anyway, but she has more pull than I do, folks. But we wanted to present this to you so that everybody in the state of Maine can see it, and the United States, for that matter, that deflectocrats can only hide things so long, and then they start popping out of the ground in pictures, especially on Facebook. Okay? Whether you like it or not. Because we here at Firm are certainly going to mention it. Basically saying, what the hell is going on here? What in the hell is going on here? Well, lots of Maine citizens, which we will present to you in just a few moments, folks, posted their fears and concerns about contractors digging up the front walk of the Blaine mansion and the side entrances as well. So we at Firm were also on site at the location just a day or so later, where busy bees of men with hard hats and safety vests and bright colors were moving and digging. So myself, I figured I would ask a worker what was going on, and if I could ask a few questions about this so-called project. I got a quick stare back from a man who seemed to be a supervisor when I just plainly asked, or from him, or a foreman that he knew of, about this ongoing project. Then he stated he was the foreman of the project. He stated direct and firmly to me that, quote, no one may ask any workers any questions about this project, unquote. And when I asked to take a few pictures, he said, quote, no, I really wouldn't do that if I were you, unquote. So here's where my pursuit of the truth and facts of this upheaval of the governor's mansion property guided me, ladies and gentlemen, was to the Capitol Police Department, just down and around the back side of the State House building for some answers. Here's what we found out. It seems the Blaine House construction also, along with the Capitol Police former main entrance, is going through a lot of changes, digging up the ground and chopping up some concrete. To talk to the Building and Ground Services, or BGS, I was given a phone number and a building control office representative, Miss LaRue. We won't go into detail about. We'll get some more details that way. But we also found out details another way, folks. So as far as the posts of the people online responding to Ms. Smith's pictures posted on Facebook after the fact, that's right, seems there were a lot of people who were interested in this or a little bit ticked off about it. Just going to read right through them real quick here, folks, but there's a lot of people who are pretty ticked off about all this expenditure, especially if it's their taxpayer dollars being used. Who authorized the expenditure? Another said, wait for me. My turn. Walls? Not for thee. It would be amazing. Surprised they used that word. One person wrote that a place that never needed a new superior high security wall than it does maybe indicates that you're planning to do something that may upset the people. I could be wrong. Another one replied, so you think that those are part of a wall, really, honestly? Those are sheet pile, one gentleman chimed in, used to make a retaining wall, usually while a concrete base is placed and cures until it's solid. So that fence is going to have some superstructure. Another one said, aren't they the same Democrats that didn't want to upgrade school security the last several times that bills were brought forth to do so over the last few years? Gee, working hard to make Maine ugly. Fine for me, but not for thee. Is it almost election season? Yeah, it can't come fast enough for some of us, folks. Sheet pile for a pile of sheet. I didn't swear. He wrote it. And here comes the coup de grace, folks. The explanation of all explanations. Somebody posting on Facebook about the sheet piles, as they are called, apparently, the ones you see upright here in this picture. According to a Ryan Lemire, who posted a day later, the Blaine House security upgrades in Maine are primarily paid for by a $10 million bond approved by voters in 2024 for restoring historic buildings with some additional support from the general fund. Total project is estimated at $4.5 million, which includes a new security system, electronic security, updated lighting, and a substantial stone and metal barrier fence to replace the previous wooden fence. Hey, sounds like this guy knows what he's talking about. The largest portion of the funding comes from a statewide bond measure approved by the voters to support government facilities. Some additional money from the state's general fund is also contributing to the cost. Existing funds. A security barrier. A new, more substantial fence and wall are being installed around the Blaine House, I would say. The project includes new electronic security systems and improved lighting and cameras. Phase 1 of the project includes upgrades to the accessible entrance, and additional accessibility updates are ongoing. One lady does say an important post. If she, meaning Janet Mills, felt loved by her constituents, do you think she would be doing this? It's sad to see the need for these protections in our historic Blaine house. Our, she says, historic Blaine house, not hers, not Mills. As kids in the neighborhood, we used to skate on the ice rink on the property. No gates, no guards, no fear of political repercussions. Leadership has changed all this. What the hell is she afraid of? Says one man. I'll be so glad when she's out of office. You're not the only one, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen of the state of Maine and the People's Blaine House, GOP House Minority Leader Katrina Smith and the rest of us sane, civil-minded, and concerned law-abiding residents here need yet another explanation as to why now, Janet, instead of wasteful spending and misappropriated funds, plus higher taxes and less revenue for hospitals, schools, refusing federal lunch program money again, and never having any Republican House or Senate leadership in any committee and public hearing, work session debates, or anything else on these more important matters. Huh? How come, Janet? We keep asking the same questions, but you still keep throwing harassment and violence at our children and our parents. Apparently not even a shrug of the proverbial shoulders or any consideration of a bipartisan inclusion of all House and Senate lawmakers on budgetary fiscal matters that now total over $11 billion. No reaction on that, Mills? Fry? Former Speaker Gideon? What a joke you are. Ms. Talbot Ross? Another one. Ryan Fecto? And Senate President Jackson. What the hell's going on? And as we wrap up, folks, in this particular version of Firm, here in Maine and still creating fallout discussions is transgender ideology. Didn't see that one coming, did you? No, apparently not. Because what we have been talking about, folks, if you're joining us a little bit late, is that we're talking about ICE applications and state reparations, among other things. Here's the other thing. As far as the trans ideologies are concerned, the rights and freedoms that have been the mainstream media, or the left-wing nut radicals, as we call them, media, decide that the transgenders have the rights and the freedoms. Really? Well, they don't. Because not only in blue states is this still going on, the media, the mainstream media, has decided to keep throwing it at the American people, all of us, especially in Maine here, with continued conversations. Well, here's a conversation. Actually, here's a few statements from some of the people who have pretty much stuck by the Constitution. Our reporters and our writers and our journalists, real ones, like myself, from the Maine Policy Institute and the Maine Wire, like this recent explanation on transgender ideology.
Next up, folks, is Maine House Republicans speak out against Janet Mills' proposed taxes and tax increases in her new budget.
The goal of these press conferences is to do two things. One is educate you about what the Republican priorities are this session, what we're working on, what we're fighting for under the dome down in Augusta on behalf of our constituents. And two, to give you an opportunity to hear us react to what's happening within state government, obviously being controlled by the Democrats, and what our thoughts and responses are to the various things that they are doing, rightly or wrongly, to the people of Maine. And so look for that sort of regular flow. We'll shoot for Tuesdays again after session, like we have been before, and hope as many of you will be able to join us as possible. And thanks, as always, to those that are tuning in at home and on the live streams as well. With that, I am going to just briefly touch on our priorities and what you can expect to see this session, and then talk about initial reactions to the budget, and then hand it over to my House counterpart, Representative Falkenham. Republicans are committed to a number of things this session. That includes what you heard on the campaign trail from legislative Republicans, namely getting energy costs under control, looking at how we do property taxes in Maine, getting a handle on that, and possibly a complete revamping of the system. Looking at welfare reform, particularly as it relates to this upcoming supplemental budget that you've seen proposed by the governor. There is absolutely space within that document to address the need for welfare reform that has been far too generous across the state of Maine. You've heard us talk about that for years. Now is the time, more than ever, to get a handle on what has been happening across Maine and why we have become the mecca of New England states, with folks flocking to access our benefits. It doesn't need to be that way. We can fix it. Now is the time.
That was just a part of it there, ladies and gentlemen. We also have another segment there to go over with you from the Maine Policy Institute, as well as the Maine Wire contributed to an additional story here as the fallout continues about transgender ideology. And when do we have to keep stopping about this? It's already been ruled on by the Supreme Court months ago. Actually going on about 6-7 months ago. So the state of the state we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, is quite ridiculous. It's enough already that we have to have our children not be treated as normal if they're not even going to be part of the solution, but being blamed as victims. It just has to stop, folks.
For a short period of time, it provides the disaster relief, and it also provides.
And we will get to that information here just shortly, ladies and gentlemen. As we continue on, firm, our Senate leadership, just to go back to that one while we're waiting for that to queue up, ladies and gentlemen. The whole idea of never having any Republican House representatives. We'll have that for you in another moment here, folks, but one final thought on that as far as the leadership of the state of Maine over these last several years of Janet Mills' administration. Horrific. This is the second time, folks. Actually, it's probably more like 3 or 4 times altogether. Janet Mills has gone out of her way, burning the midnight oil and your taxpayer dollars at the same time, like lighting old stogies with $500 bills. What am I talking about? Stories of Republicans coming in for a session last year, maybe even before that, the year before that, to vote on the very important taxes and supplemental budget proposals by Mills. But then, only to find out when they're coming in a late evening session, somewhere between 10 at night and 11 o'clock, and even probably midnight, we're met by security in force of the Capitol Police at the State House, where you come in and you go through security the wands and the overhead. They were denied entrance per order of Janet Mills, the House Speaker at the time. Gideon, I think. I don't believe it was Talbot Ross. Blocked from voting. Keep that one in mind. So now, here's More from that exchange. Actually, it was a statement from one of the staff, journalist staff, from our own Maine Policy Institute, folks, and the Maine Wire. This recent explanation about the transgender ideology, rights, and freedoms fallout.
Specifically, what do you think is most worthy of paying attention to?
Absolutely. So a lot of people have been focusing on his immigration-related executive orders, understandably. But I think what's most interesting is one regarding gender ideology, specifically in Maine. One he titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism. And then there's, it's a longer name than that, but if someone were to look up that, they would find it. And this is something he issued on day one, and it is essentially, to summarize it, because it is a bit of a complex legal issue, in 2020, the Supreme Court reinterpreted Title IX and Title VII federal anti-discrimination law so that sex-based discrimination includes, which is illegal federally, also includes gender identity and sexual orientation. And this was an employment case, Bostock v. Clayton County, where the court was deciding whether a man who had been fired for being gay was fired illegally. And the court essentially said that this man was fired illegally because while sexual orientation discrimination is not covered under Title VII, which is a federal and in part anti-discrimination in employment law, sex-based discrimination is illegal. And their argument was the employees of this company, the women were allowed to be attracted to men without being fired, but the men were not. Therefore, firing a man for being gay is also sex-based discrimination. And they said
because it's unique to that gender, yeah.
Right, exactly. They said this employer was applying certain rules to men that they did, or requirements to men that they did not apply to women. And they also said this applies to trans issues. If a trans person says, I identify as a woman and I'm trying to apply to a sports team, for example, but they're a biological male, they may not be allowed in. But if they were a biological female, they would be. And they said this also applies to those cases,
yeah.
which is interesting because this was actually a Justice Gorsuch opinion. The Trump appointee, this was actually, in many ways, a conservative interpretation of the text of Title VII and Title IX, a very strict textualist interpretation. So it shows how judges very often interpret laws in ways that a lot of people may not think so.
That pretty much covers it here, folks, when it comes to that particular topic. A very touchy one, as it always has been since the beginning, when LGBTQ, GLAAD, and all of them decided that they were going to step on the toes of the Trump administration, all of his cabinet members, every way possible to make sure transgender men played in women's sports at all costs, even violence, just to get a law passed? What the hell is the world coming to? Well, for your sanity, folks, and everybody else out there in the United States of America, we'll start with the state of Maine. That's about as far as we can go. But we can branch out on YouTube and Twitter, which is what we do, ladies and gentlemen, right here. Firm. Fairness in Reporting Media at gmail.com is where you want to go down here. Our Gmail address, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're all about this. Truth, facts, reality, and common sense. We support the First Amendment, and we will defend it to the end, if necessary. We appreciate it if you would join us. Consider that. Find us also on x.com and youtube.com, 24 hours a day for podcasts. I'm Mark Merrill. Peace to all.